and then eventually you just draw Crystallize and you win the game. But this
Yeah.
Thry Falchion really.
You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Eternal Tournament Series, Season 6, Week 1, Round 4. We've got another exciting match for you. I am Gabe, also known as Calimdir, and I'm joined by my co-caster, Sir Rhino.
Hello, and yeah, the players are all going, but deck breakdown of these two 3-0 players. Both players currently undefeated after 3 rounds of Swiss action. We've got BassoonBuffoon on Felon Control and Darkness on Elysian Midrange. We're going to see a lot of this Elysian midrange deck today. I think something like at least a dozen players brought Elysian today, which is a pretty high representation, higher than we're used to seeing in the tournament. But as we saw, it's been dropping in spots, but also climbing to the top as we see Darkness doing well with it. On the other end, we've got BassoonBuffoon on Felon Control. And there's usually a few different ways you can do the top end of Felon Control. And Buffoon opting to go with the Celestial Omen as Zindel's Gift top end and no Vera's. How do you feel about that?
I kind of like his build of Felon Control. It's just kind of going for the consistency of what cards he's going to see. But the issue is against these time decks where you just get to a situation where you're trying to answer everything and you're not being proactive enough. And I think that he's going to struggle in this matchup.
Yeah, and that's where things like when you do start to fall behind, Withering Witch plus Lightning Storm plus Black Sky Harbinger can be real key. But Buffoon's only running 2 witches. And the other really interesting thing here is Darkness is running 3 Backlash main deck. Normally we see 2. I would say that's the normal number you see in Elysian. Darkness ups it to 3, and that could end up being a really key thing here in the matchup, as having 3 Backlash against a deck with 4 Death Strike, a Feeding Time, wiping out the Lightning Storm or Celestial Omen, that's pretty big.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not running Obelisk, interestingly enough, in the Elysian deck. So he's a little more focused on the mid-range strategy there.
Yeah, that is very peculiar, especially when you're still playing Scouting Party, Amber Acolyte, Temple Scribe, Friendly Wisp, Initiative Sands. All these cards will never be out of the 4 Black Sky Harbingers range from BassoonBuffoon's deck. So we're giving the players the go-ahead here. Don't need to break this matchup down too much more as players resolve mulligans and the action gets going.
Yeah, we just have time. We have influence coming down from both players. We have power for at least 3 turns for both players, so this is going to be pretty good. BassoonBuffoon with a pretty slow hand, though. He's got double Omen, both of his Omens, and a Wisdom, so not too much action for a while. Whereas on Darkness's side, he's got 2 False Princes. How do you feel about this so far?
Yeah, the starting hands certainly favor Darkness here. Although now Buffoon critically finds a second Primal Source in Felon Banner here. Darkness, I'm not a huge fan of playing out the time sigil there instead of the Diplomatic Seal. But crucially, the False Prince couldn't come out on turn 2 because Darkness's hand was all single faction source power.
Yeah, and so this matchup we've talked about Elysian midrange before, because Elysian midrange, ever since the rise in popularity to practice midrange, Elysian midrange became more popular. It's been a big staple in the metagame.
Yeah.
But Felon Control has fallen in and out of favor for a long time, and so it's interesting to see it back in the metagame now. We've seen a couple people on it in this tournament, and doing all pretty well, I think. I'll have to look at maybe there's somebody in the O3 playing it, but BassoonBuffoon doing well, and I think Balak has also been doing well.
Right. So Buffoon finds a Lightning Storm here, which would clean up the 1/1s, but wouldn't clean up the False Princes. So instead opts to just play out the Steward of the Past. False Prince can be both very good or very bad against Felon players' draw, right? When it dies to Vera's favor, it feels real bad. Yeah. But other than that, Felon doesn't have a lot of answers to it other than, Permafrost as well. And then they're Permafrosting your 3-drop. So we're seeing that here where False Prince is putting on a lot of pressure, but Darkness doesn't have really anything else to follow it up, just a whole lot of power.
Yeah, and this storm is fine here because it does get 4 power off the board, and he won't be in lethal. But losing 2 power on the side of darkness is not a big deal. He already got out his pressure. He already got his value from those initiates.
Yeah, the biggest thing Lightning Storm does there is take lethal off the board. Now Buffoon can get a 5/5 down to block this false prince. I would have preferred to have seen them play the switch the order of banner and seat, so that this turn, if they drew permafrost, they would have been able to play it. But again, those little things I'm not going to hang on too much. But we see Sandstorm Titan come down from dark. Buffoon's got an Annihilate ready for it, though.
So this is a really dangerous situation here, where Buffoon now finally has stabilized, but he stabilized at 3.
This is also a weird sequence of plays. Darkness didn't play out of power with 3 of them in hand, and then Buffoon didn't annihilate the Titan, knowing your opponent plays 3 backlash.
Yeah.
So I can't say I approve of any of these lines of play right now from either player. But it is what it is. Darkness is just holding all this power instead of playing it out, even though you're in a deck with backlash. I can't say I like that line of thinking.
Yeah, it's definitely questionable. It gives Darkness a few more outs there. So I was gonna say that it was going to be pretty close. Darkness just needed to draw a few threats because getting in 3 damage is not too difficult, but Bassoon has just drawn much more life since we got to this stabilized point.
And in top deck mode, Scouting Party is one of the best cards you can find, but not when your opponent's got both Lightning Storm and Sky Harbinger, and that might just close the door here, as now Buffoon goes up to 10 power, can Omen and get a removal spell off of that Omen in the same turn if he so desires, or now can just get another Champion of Cunning and just almost certainly close out the game or something like that. I don't think he has an extract to find for lethal.
Yeah, and Darkness just had a really high tempo start and then just drew, flooded out sort of.
Yeah.
It was answered by that Lightning Storm, and so a huge amount of card advantage was gained for Buffoon, and then the Omens, having 2 of whatever you want, really put Bassoon in a good spot for the late game.
Yeah, Buffoon just drew far more haymakers than Darkness. Darkness did draw a lot of power, but so did Buffoon. They basically drew the same amount. It was just that Buffoon's, cards were quite a bit higher impact, right? Champion of Cunning, Black Sky Harbinger, Celestial Omen. So while somebody might say, "Oh, flooding,"
yeah, it's not really flooding when you consider how many more cards Darkness played at the beginning of the game, and then all of them were answered by Lightning Storm. It's just that the 2 false princes were very threatening.
So I imagine post-board now, those Xenon Obelisks that we said weren't in Darkness's deck, they're in the sideboard. I think those will come in the face of a deck playing Black Sky or playing all of these 1/1. Do you see anything else happening here? There's also 4 slow in Darkness's.
Slow's a really interesting card. It just, what does he want to take out? I think the bigger question is, what cards doesn't Darkness want?
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of these small units are going to get cleaned up by all these sweepers, but he could just bring in Obelisk and then suddenly he wants the small units again, and it's just a really weird scenario here for Darkness.
Yeah, like we talk about how great Crystallize is in certain matchups. Do you think that it applies here as well against a deck that's really just trying to remove all of your threats? They can get into a board stall. They can have things like Harbinger, Stewards, and Bloodcasters sitting in play, but is that still, like, there are spots where Crystallize could still be good, but is it good enough in enough spots to warrant sticking in the deck?
Well, I'll tell you, it's certainly not good enough to bring in the 3rd. But whether you take it out or not, that's where I'm stuck, because Crystallize is really it's definitely won me games on the side of Elysian against Film, right? They get that one pesky steward that just isn't letting you attack or whatever. But you can just build up lethal without that. What it does do, though, is get you there 1 turn faster, maybe, to try and dodge that, before the Lightning Storm Witch comes out. So it depends on what other cards he thinks are more valuable, because I think Crystallize is a bit more valuable than some of these, than maybe like maybe a Xenon Initiation. I know that's a little strange, because but a lot of, when you have a lot of deadly units, Xenon Initiation gets a little bit worse.
Yeah, like we're looking at Darkness sideboarding right now. Just doesn't seems like he's a little confused on what to do. So we'll give him a bit more time here to figure it out. But we see the 4 slows in, the backlash count going up to 4. Dawnwalker and False Sprints getting trimmed down. I don't mind taking out Dawnwalker against a Steward of the Past deck. I get it. I don't know if I would trim out that many threats though, especially when you're bringing in Obelisk. The whole point is to turn them all into bigger and better threats.
Still has 31 units, so
yeah,
that's quite.
Oh yeah, it's the unit count's not too bad right now. I do like the idea of cutting Xena Initiation. I know you mentioned that it's cute to have, but you have 3 Predatory Carnosaurs. Those can already hit. The big hit is what, Champion of Cunning, something like that.
Yeah, and Permafrost is the you know what, he's cut. Okay, I don't mean to nitpick, but Permafrost is, I think, the best removal spell you could ask for against Feln.
Sideboarding is very hard to do. It is a skill that especially if you don't have a deep, long Magic the Gathering background or something like that, you probably are still training it. And there's not a lot out there in Eternal, especially in the Eternal community, about how to get better at sideboarding. It's just not something we talk about because you don't do it on ladder. You only do it on the weekends in this tournament or on Thursday nights in the TCG tournament. So it's, we might harp on it like, I don't know if I, but it is a skill that needs to be developed. And even though we have our own opinions, it doesn't mean they're correct. We might be looking at one angle and forgetting about a different angle. We haven't even talked about Bassoon's side.
I want to let you take that one because you're the Feln control expert here.
I like bringing in extra Withering Witch and bringing in Vera so that you can loop Vera, Black Sky Harbinger, Withering Witch. That just sounds pretty appealing to me. You could bring in the 2 Sabotages to try and snipe the Xenon Obelisk that your opponents are bringing in, plus clear the way through a Backlash, something like that. But again, you're boarding in a card that doesn't board impact. And the 4th Permafrost is certainly something I want to bring in. As far as what I would cut, I would certainly cut 1 Omen. I would probably also cut the Gift. I don't think a 7 cost card that has basically no board impact is where you want to be against a proactive mid-range deck. And that would be really it. I don't think I'd change too much else at that point. So try and make room for the Veras, Witches, Permafrost. Maybe not the full 4 Withering Witch. Maybe go up to 3. But the game is underway, and we'll see what happens.
Yep, and we're just having players go back and forth. BassoonBuffoon not with too much to play, but critically drawing that Feln Bloodcaster, which is going to be nice to block this Amber Acolyte and just stave off some of this early damage. And I do agree with you pretty strongly about the Feln sideboarding. I think that the Witch is a super powerful card against all these time decks, these mid-range time decks, and I think Vera is the most consistent win con. You don't need a Zindel's Gift or anything like that. You can just play big units and just beat them at their own game.
Yep. And then if you are worried about Crystallize still being in post board, I suppose you could try. Like that's another reason that you could bring in a Crystallize and Obelisk, so it has more than one good hit. But again, it's tough to find room for that as Buffoon is stuck on 3 power, can't play out any of these 4 drops, and Darkness is curving out, draws 2 cards off this Wisp, and is in the driver's seat of this game.
Yeah, and we're seeing similarly the false sprint start, but which is interesting because he cut a couple false sprints. I think he's only got 2, but this time not accelerating them out and has a lot more gas in the tank still.
This is another reason why I like false sprints more than say Dawnwalker. If you're deciding between one matchup, is it naturally can swing into these 2 5s and 3 5s that Feln plays out. Everything in Feln has at least 5 health. Or I guess
except for Withering Witch,
Yeah, Withering Witch though, that's a whole thing on its own. But Darkness just curving out real hard here. Buffoon crucially finds that 4th power, but it's depleted, so still won't be able to play anything else here, and it's just getting beaten down as Darkness gets a hold up backlash, play down an Obelisk. Just there's no coming back for Feln.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. I mean, a Storm does deal with or does turn off quite a bit of damage, but still taking false prints and then just all the threats that Darkness has. Yeah, there's too many things that need to go right for BassoonBuffoon.
Darkness opting to not go for lethal there, played Frost and Obelisk to get the kill, but decided not to do that, I assumed, so he could hold up backlash moving forward. but that's not the case, as he immediately plays out a Surso and leaves down Backlash, but it doesn't matter. Buffoon is dead.
Yeah, he needed to have an extra 3 power and also 2 cards that were, and then a Storm somehow to play Witch Storm.
Yeah, Darkness just coming out too fast, Buffoon stumbling a little too much, and almost could have turned the corner, but just not quite there, and Darkness takes game 2, and that means we get a decider here in game 3.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. And so now that we're going back to sideboards, I just want to touch back up on why I think Permafrost is probably the best card you could ask for in Elysian versus Feln. Because Feln has, I mean, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, Feln has a lot of trouble answering Permafrost.
Yeah, Permafrost is an annoying card. There is Feln can really do about it. Once units, of course, it's really there to just get blockers out of the way, right? If you Permafrost a Feln Bloodcaster, you can still eventually activate Bloodcaster. If you Permafrost a Steward of the Past is still silencing your Dawnwalkers. If you Permafrost Champion of Cunning, the Champion of Cunning is still going to buff all of your units. But it removes that blocker, which is what Elysian wants to do. You want to get it and beat down.
Yeah, I think I'm more what I should have said is as far as removal options are concerned.
Yeah,
I think it's the best option.
I would not really ever cut that as a removal spell, especially in Elysian matchup. Like I like it more, as we alluded to before, as far as Permafrost versus Initiation or Permafrost even versus Crystallize.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the 4th Permafrost more than either of those cards.
But it looks like we have hands in game 3 already, and we have a slow in Darkness's opener.
We have a slow in Darkness's opener, but we also have a slow hand in Darkness's.
Yeah,
Surso Predatory Carnosaur.
I think he's already redrawn as well, or they've already redrawn, and I think they're going to be stuck with this. So they're going to have the turn 1 slow, get to see what's going on with BassoonBuffoon's hand, and then just kind of sit around for a while, hope they draw power.
Yeah, Darkness could turn 1 slow, or might opt to just get the banner out of hand. But no, goes with the Time Sigil, uses slow, and I think we'll see a 12-cost Black Sky Harbinger.
He goes for the Wisdom, which really... I
see.
Yeah.
Darkness drew another slow.
Oh.
So, while it's not power or an early threat, the plan here might be to, slow this Wisdom first, and then slow the Harbinger. Something like that, but we'll see. Darkness chooses to instead wait on the slow, knowing there's nothing really to hit in the meantime, can wait on the timing of it, and Buffoon rips the Bloodcaster off the top and deploys that there.
You said this was a slow hand, but I don't think this is what you meant.
Well, I think you underestimate how smart I am then. No, yeah, another slow comes out. The Harbinger, 12 cost. Buffoon finds power. Well, I wouldn't be shocked if this Harbinger eventually gets casted, but in the meantime, Darkness finds an Obelisk and an Initiative that stands off the top that will survive this turn and get Darkness way back into this game.
Oh yeah, getting the Obelisk out and then drawing a power lets Surso come down the next turn.
And yeah, Darkness did find a power, but it was bleeded. Amber Monument being the tease that it is. And now Buffoon, hitting for 2, can cast Wisdom of the Elders for 6 here, and I think that's what we're going to see. Opting to do it on their opponent's turn, leave that information up, and maybe get a backlash out of hand.
Yeah.
So yep. Surso comes down. It's a 7/7. Darkness finding a False Prince for the turn. And imagine a Permafrost will come down on this Surso, but maybe Darkness will try and set up a Witch into Harbinger turn, but I think they'll wait a bit longer on that.
Yeah. So we have, we just have a lot of answers for BassoonBuffoon right now. If he just sits around and gets to 12 power, with this Permafrost, he can just wait like as long as he wants, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Surprisingly, Darkness the Carnosaur there could have denied this Bloodcaster activation, instead saving Carnosaur for something like maybe a clean kill on a Champion of Cunning in the future. Instead, Surso comes down, gets Permafrosted, and we see some card draw come out from the 2/5.
Yeah, and I would have liked seeing the Carnosaur last turn, but it's fine. Getting an extra.
Ooh.
Ooh, and the 2 stewards now from
Yeah,
the
but
side of BassoonBuffoon.
this might be where we see Withering Witch. No, we do see double steward because there's a tricky timing with Withering Witch against Obelisk decks where you want to play it, but you don't want to play it on 7 because it might get out of Black Sky Harbinger range the next turn. So like Darkness is on 6 here, which is pretty key. But Darkness could also just draw another Obelisk and get them out of Harbinger range too. So finding that timing is pretty crucial. And I think what Buffoon's banking on here is getting to 11 power and just going Witch plus Harbinger on 11 and not have to worry about any of those kind of things.
Or, 17 power,
Yeah, whatever works. The other key thing there is Withering Witch and Black Sky Harbinger aren't spells. You can't backdash them. Once you Witch Harbinger, your board is dying.
And I think part of another reason why he wanted to save Witch there was just because he wasn't too threatened by the 1 Carnosaur, because that's really the only real threat in the board. Yeah. And so this Crystallize not able to get around the Backlash.
Yep, Backlash doing Backlash things takes out the Crystallize, and this is where your opponent might not have that many Backlash targets, but Scouting Party and Crystallize are very good hits, especially when they keep Crystallize in. So we see Backlash taking out that, and also sometimes you can just Backlash the Backlash, right?
And that is a big draw. That is going to turn the clock over onto the other side of the field.
Yep, but Darkness does have a Zenith Initiation to deal with it, and Buffoon opting to use the Withering Witch here rather than trying to wait for the 11th power, because now the Withering Witch becomes a 3/1.
Yep, but now there's a live Champion of Cunning in the Void, so Vera becomes a much more live draw in addition to just more champions.
Yeah, I think Bassoon should have been a little more patient on this with, but finds a Lightning Storm to clear out the board anyway if he so chooses. We'll see. Looks like just the Witch is coming in here.
I think I might have liked to have seen the Storm played first and just attack with the Steward, but who knows?
Yeah, that's extra damage if you're planning on storming anyways. Maybe depending on how they blocked, you would play Black Sky Harbinger instead is the idea. I'm not sure. But
yeah.
All right, Buffoon finds more power. That would have been the 11th power to do plus Witch combo. But I think they were a little nervous about keeping too large in case their opponent had another Crystallize and you didn't have the Backlash for that one.
So right now, BassoonBuffoon can just play out some Lifesteal Flyers and race, right?
Yeah, I think that's what they kind of have to do here. They don't have any other play. A bunch of units that are about to get even bigger. You got to try and just win this race. Darkness has perfect information here, knows the last card in Bassoon's hand is a 12-cost Harbinger. And it looks like we'll just swing in and finds a Rhino and gets the hold up Backlash. And all right, so we've got dueling Backlashes.
Yeah. So a Sandstorm Titan would be a pretty useful draw here from the side of Darkness. I would put it back into a little bit of a board stall. And then, you have to trade off one of your units with the Steward, but that's fine.
Yeah. So Buffoon opts to take the damage here, not scared of Crystallize now that they have Backlash, thinks they can take a hit here. And Annihilate will be lethal with Backlash up as well. So we'll see if Buffoon goes for that. Will BassoonBuffoon go against their own name and find the right line? They've got to be a little nervous. Darkness held the power there to bluff some extra cards, but looks like Bassoon's going for it anyway.
Yeah, and so the extra 2 damage from the Backlash, doesn't matter too much, but it's getting the damage in from Steward kills him.
Yep, pushing through Steward here gives BassoonBuffoon lethal with that 12-cost Black Sky Harbinger. So slow can be a powerful card if you've got a fast start. Darkness didn't quite have a fast enough start to really leverage that tempo gain from slow, and BassoonBuffoon gets to 12 power, no problem, casts a 12-cost Black Sky Harbinger, and gets lethal.
Yeah, that was a fun, grindy game that we saw there, and I was really expecting Elysian midrange to take that one, but because Elysian midrange is one of those really grindy midrange decks that's just very difficult for control who's trying to be reactive to answer. Yeah. But we saw we saw him have the cards. We saw him have and not the one-for-one answers, the nice big sweeping answers and some good flying threats to close it out.
Yeah, and the other really cool thing about the power of backlash on both sides. Backlash negating crystallize crucially in one spot, backlashing a backlash that was trying to backlash and annihilate. So it's always fun to see the stack get used in Eternal, and that's just great fun.
But I think that's our last match for this round, right? So I think we'll be catching everybody again in the next round.
Yeah, that is it, at least for coverage. I don't know if standing still, but BassoonBuffoon on the back of Feln gets that one, goes to the 4-0 bracket. Darkness falls to 3-1, but still very much alive for top 8 as we have 2 more rounds to go. And we'll return in just a moment with some round 5 action.